xAI Colossus, the AI energy monster reshaping the US grid. Welcome back to Musk's Energy Playbook, the series where we go beyond the headlines, past the press releases, and deep into the real engineering, economics, and consequences behind the most ambitious energy projects on the planet. This is episode 4. And if the previous 3 episodes gave you a sense of the scale at which Elon Musk and his constellation of companies are thinking about energy, this one is going to redefine your understanding of what massive actually means. Let me pose a question to start. What if a single private company, in a single facility, in a single American city, required more electricity than entire mid-sized metropolitan areas, and managed to get that power flowing in under 5 months? Not 5 years, not 5 decades, 5 months. That's not a hypothetical. That's xAI's Colossus data center in Memphis, Tennessee. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the most power-hungry artificial intelligence facilities ever constructed on Earth. In this extended deep dive, we're going to do something different from most tech coverage of this story. We're not just going to talk about the GPUs or the Grok AI model trained on this cluster. We're going to examine the full energy story from the ground up, the infrastructure crisis that Colossus exposed, the hybrid engineering strategy xAI deployed to solve it, the community and environmental debate igniting in Memphis, and the broader implications for the entire United States national grid. Get comfortable, because by the end, you'll understand not just what Colossus is, but why it represents a fundamental turning point in how America powers its technological future. Let's start with the raw facts, because they are genuinely difficult to wrap your head around. xAI's Colossus data center sits on a large industrial campus in Memphis, Tennessee, a city historically known for logistics, the Mississippi River, and blues music. It is now also home to what may be the densest concentration of AI computing hardware ever assembled under one roof. Phase 1 of Colossus was completed in just 122 days from groundbreaking to operational. For context, most utility-scale infrastructure projects of comparable energy demand take years to permit, plan, and build. A new natural gas peaker plant? Typically 3 to 5 years from conception to first power. A major new substation? 18 months at minimum. xAI moved at a pace that the traditional energy industry simply has no framework for. When Phase 1 came online, it housed over 100,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs, the gold standard chips for large-scale AI model training. Each H100 draws approximately 700 watts under full load. Do the math, and you're looking at a theoretical maximum power draw of around 70 megawatts from the GPUs alone, before accounting for cooling infrastructure, networking equipment, lighting, and the dozens of other systems required to keep such a facility operational around the clock. Total facility demand in Phase 1 was reported to run into the hundreds of megawatts range. But xAI has never indicated it plans to stop at Phase 1. Public statements and industry reporting have pointed toward expansion targets of up to 1 million GPUs or more as the facility scales. If that trajectory is realized, Colossus would represent a power demand that rivals or exceeds the electricity consumption of some smaller US states. To put this in the most relatable terms possible, at full build-out, a facility like this could consume as much electricity as a city of several 100,000 people, not occasionally, not during peak hours, but continuously, every hour of every day of every year. AI training workloads don't clock out at 5 p.m. This is what makes Colossus categorically different from the data centers of the previous generation. A Facebook or Google data center from a decade ago was large by the standards of its time, but those facilities were serving billions of users in relatively lightweight compute tasks, displaying web pages, storing photos, processing search queries. AI training at the frontier scale that xAI is pursuing is orders of magnitude more computationally intensive. The energy signature is incomparable, and Memphis, as we're about to discuss, was not remotely prepared for what was about to land on its doorstep. Here is the core problem that every major AI hyperscaler is running into right now, and that xAI confronted head-on in Memphis. America's electrical grid was not built for this moment. The US. Transmission system, the high-voltage backbone that carries electricity from power plants to cities and suburbs, was largely designed and constructed in the mid to late 20th century. It was engineered for a world of relatively predictable, gradually growing electricity demand. Residential neighborhoods that needed more power grew slowly. Industrial facilities submitted interconnection requests years in advance. Utilities had time to plan, permit, and build. That model has been completely upended by the AI boom. When xAI approached the Memphis utility, Memphis Light, Gas and Water, which serves the local area, the ask was extraordinary. Deliver hundreds of megawatts of reliable electrical capacity to a single site on a timeline measured in months. The utility simply didn't have the infrastructure to comply. The existing transmission lines feeding the area weren't sized for that level of load. The nearest high-capacity substations weren't positioned to serve the site directly. And critically, the permitting process for building new high-voltage transmission infrastructure in the United States can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years, involving federal environmental reviews, state utility commission approvals, right-of-way negotiations with potentially hundreds of individual landowners, and equipment lead times that have been severely stretched by global supply chain pressures. 5 to 10 years. xAI was measuring their timeline in months. This is not a unique problem to Memphis. Across the country, utility interconnection queues, the waiting lists for new power projects, or large industrial customers seeking grid connection have exploded in length. According to data from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, the amount of generation capacity sitting in interconnection queues across the United States has grown from roughly 200 gigawatts a few years ago to well over 2,000 gigawatts today. The grid is not just strained, it is genuinely struggling to keep pace with the velocity of demand growth being driven by AI, electric vehicles, domestic manufacturing reshoring, and electrification of buildings. MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, which manages the bulk of the grid serving the Memphis region, has been vocal about the challenges of integrating large new loads at this speed. Grid operators are dealing with a situation their planning models never anticipated. Individual industrial customers showing up with power demands that would have been considered utility-scale generation projects just 10 years ago. So xAI faced a genuine dilemma. They had the land, the GPUs, and the operational urgency. What they didn't have was grid power, at least not at the scale and speed they needed it. And rather than wait for the traditional system to catch up, they did what Musk companies have done repeatedly across multiple industries. They decided to build their own solution. The strategy xAI deployed at Colossus is best understood as a 3-layer hybrid energy architecture, each layer solving a different problem, each complementing the others, and together forming a system capable of delivering the kind of reliability that AI training absolutely cannot compromise on. Layer 1. Portable natural gas turbines. The most immediately visible and most controversial element of xAI's energy solution in Memphis has been the deployment of portable natural gas combustion turbines. These are not permanent utility-scale power plants. They are trailer-mounted or skid-mounted gas turbines, similar in concept to the kind of temporary generation assets that grid operators bring online during emergencies or that industrial projects use as bridge power during construction. xAI is reported to have deployed a significant number of these units at the Colossus site, estimates in the range of dozens of turbines, collectively capable of producing several hundred megawatts of power. The critical advantage of this approach is speed. A portable gas turbine can be transported, installed, fueled, and generating electricity in weeks, not years. No new transmission lines required. No utility commission approval for the generation asset itself. Fuel trucks keep the generators running while everything else is being sorted out. This is a pragmatic, first principles response to an infrastructure gap. Yes, natural gas combustion produces carbon emissions. Yes, running dozens of temporary generators in a residential and semi-urban area raises legitimate air quality questions. Questions that community advocates in Memphis have been forceful in raising, and which we'll discuss in detail shortly. But from a pure energy availability standpoint, the gas turbines solved the immediate problem. They gave Colossus the power it needed to begin training Grok and other AI systems while permanent infrastructure solutions were developed. Layer 2. Tesla Megapacks, the stability engine. The second layer of the system is arguably the most technically interesting, and it's one that showcases the vertical integration advantage that Musk's ecosystem of companies provides. xAI deployed a substantial battery energy storage system at Colossus using Tesla Megapacks, the large-format, utility-scale lithium iron phosphate battery systems that Tesla's energy division produces. To understand why Megapacks are so important here, you need to understand the particular nature of AI training power demand. Unlike a factory that runs equipment at a relatively steady load, or an office building whose electricity draw follows predictable daily patterns, a GPU cluster engaged in large-scale AI training creates highly variable, extremely rapid fluctuations in power demand. Training jobs are scheduled, paused, checkpointed, and restarted. Large batches of model training can cause power draw to spike sharply over very short time intervals. From the perspective of the electrical grid, this kind of load profile is problematic. Rapid demand swings can cause voltage fluctuations, frequency deviations, and in extreme cases, instability in the local grid. Megapacks address this problem elegantly. The battery systems sit between the power source, whether that's the gas turbines, the utility grid connection, or eventually solar arrays, and the data center load. When AI workloads spike demand, a Megapacks discharge instantly, providing the additional power needed without causing a corresponding spike on the grid. When workloads ease and demand drops, the batteries recharge. The effect from the grid's perspective is a much smoother, more predictable load profile. The chaotic, spiky signature of GPU training gets absorbed and buffered by the batteries before it ever reaches the transmission system. Beyond load smoothing, the Megapacks serve a critical backup function. In a facility where even a few seconds of power interruption can corrupt training runs representing millions of dollars of compute time, having instant response battery backup is not optional. The Megapacks can bridge any gap between a power disruption and the startup of backup generation, protecting the continuity of operations. The software intelligence coordinating this system, managing the charge and discharge cycles of the Megapacks, balancing power flow from multiple sources, predicting and responding to load changes from the GPU cluster, is a sophisticated real-time control problem. Tesla's battery management system and the broader energy management software draw on years of Megapack deployments at utility scale across the world. Layer 3. Long-term renewables commitment. The third layer of xAI's energy strategy is the one furthest from completion, but arguably most important for the long-term story. xAI has committed to developing substantial solar generation capacity to serve Colossus over time, combined with additional battery storage to handle the intermittency that solar introduces. This commitment reflects both environmental responsibility and economic logic. Solar and storage at the scale Colossus will eventually require is a significant capital investment, but once built, the marginal cost of generation is essentially zero. Compared to the ongoing fuel costs of running natural gas turbines at hundreds of megawatts continuously, solar plus storage represents a compelling long-term economics case, quite apart from the emissions benefits. The precise timeline and scale of the renewables build-out has not been fully disclosed publicly. What is clear is that the gas turbines are explicitly framed as a transitional measure, not a permanent solution. The pathway xAI has laid out, fast gas bridge power, battery stability, long-term renewables, is a coherent sequence strategy rather than an improvised patchwork. Let's go deeper on the engineering, because this is where the story gets genuinely fascinating for anyone who thinks about power systems. The fundamental challenge of serving an AI training cluster from the grid is that AI loads don't behave like any industrial load that grid planners historically designed for. When a steel mill runs, its power draw is massive but relatively steady. The furnaces run at consistent temperatures. The rolling mills have predictable cycles. When an AI training cluster runs, the power draw is governed by software scheduling, model architecture, batch sizes, and checkpoint intervals, all of which can change on timescales of seconds to minutes. Consider what happens at the grid connection point of a facility like Colossus, when a large distributed training run is launched across all 100,000 GPUs simultaneously. The power demand doesn't ramp up gracefully over hours. It can step up sharply in a matter of seconds as racks spin up to full utilization. For a local distribution grid, this kind of step change in load, potentially tens of megawatts appearing instantaneously, is extremely challenging to manage. It creates voltage sags on the feeder lines, can trigger protective relaying in the substation, and propagates as a frequency perturbation into the broader transmission system.
The Megapack deployment addresses this at the point of interconnection.
The batteries are configured to monitor the data center's power draw continuously, essentially watching the GPU load in real time and pre-positioning their charge state to absorb anticipated spikes. When the step change comes, the batteries respond within milliseconds, far faster than any rotating generation asset could ramp. The grid sees a smooth, controlled ramp rather than an instantaneous shock. On the inverter side, modern utility-scale battery systems like Megapacks can also provide synthetic inertia, a capability that is becoming increasingly important as grids integrate more renewable generation and retire older thermal plants. Traditional power plants have large rotating masses, turbines, generators, whose physical inertia naturally resists frequency changes. As those plants are retired, grid frequency becomes more volatile.